As you know, this course is a self-assessment course. The following video is a guide for you to do that self-assessment of the course. The first thing you should do is go to the home page on Virtual Sabaña. Then look for the final course rubric and the suggested chart for tracking your work. The self-assessment rubric has three large parts. One is the action plan. The other one is the online participation, which is divided into attendance, individual work, group work, and as module hosts. And the last part is the teaching philosophy. This chart will help you track your work so that you can easily do your own self-assessment. In the first part, you're going to mark the attendance for each one of the sessions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And as it says in the left-hand column, the total is the number of sessions attended. You will write that number where it says total, and that number will allow you to determine your grade on the rubric. For example, if you attended 6 of the real-time sessions and presented valid excuses for those were missed and completed the work for the session, you will mark under column 4. The second part on the chart is the individual work, and that has several parts. In the first part, you will write the number of posts that you made on time for each session, and you will add those posts and place the corresponding value in total. And that's the first step of this part. At the end of the course, when you've totaled up the number of individual posts that you did on time, you will divide that total of posts by the total required posts, which we will give you towards the end of the course, and you will multiply that number by 100. Then you will place that percentage in the column under partial. You will do exactly the same thing for the feedback that you did individually. Add the number of posts that you did on time in each session, get the total, and divide the total of posts by total required posts, which we will give you, multiply by 100, and that percentage goes under partial again. Some of the work you will be doing is in groups. However, when you assess that group work, there will be a part that corresponds to the contribution of each individual member. The score from each one of those charts will be placed in the appropriate session. For example, if a session 1 has a group activity, then you will have 2 scores, one for your individual contribution and one for the group work. You will place the score of your individual contribution in this column under session 1 for your work. Then you will average out the number of scores that you have and place that under total. Once you have that total, you will divide your average by 5 and multiply it by 100. That new percentage will go under partial. You will also have journal posts, which are individual. You will write the number of posts that you have done on time for each session. There's only one journal post for session 1, and you write 1. Then you add all the journal posts that you did on time and place the total under total. You will then once again divide the total of posts by the total required posts, which we will give you, and multiply by 100. That new percentage also goes under partial. Finally, for your individual work, there will be on most sessions a self-assessment checklist, which will be graded directly on the platform. Please transfer that grade to the appropriate column and then average those scores and place the average under total. After that, divide your average by 5 and multiply by 100 and place that percentage under partial. In order to average out your individual grades, you must average your 5 individual percentages that appear in the column in partial add and divide them by 5, and then transfer that new score to the appropriate column of your rubric. The average of your individual work will be determined on the rubric by the percentage that you achieved. For example, if when you averaged out all the partial percentages you got an 87, once again you would mark the column under 4 because it says complied with 75 to 89% of the requirements for individual work. Once you have been a session host, you can grade your work according to the rubric. You will place under the correct session the score that you get on the rubric for your work as a host. Let's see how that works. As a host, you have certain functions to fulfill, which are detailed in the general program and also in another document under the Home tab. Then you will define if you fulfilled all of the functions and also encouraged participation and debate, or if you just fulfilled the functions as they were required, if you fulfilled some of the functions, if you just fulfilled a few of them, or if you definitely did not fulfill any of the functions, and grade yourself accordingly. Finally, you're going to determine your grade as depending on the group work that you participated in. And that will be done in a similar way to which you found your individual grade. First, you will take the score from the Collaborative Group Assessment Checklist, Part 2, that is, the assessment of the group, and you will place the score in the appropriate column depending on the session. The total will be the average of the scores that you have in the sessions in which you are required to work as a group. Once you have that average under total, you will divide your average by 5 and multiply it by 100. That percentage will go in the column under partial. You will also be required to give feedbacks as a group, and you will write the number of posts that you did on time as a group for each of the sessions that require it. That number will be divided by the total number of posts that are required, which we will give to you. You will multiply it by 100 and place that percentage under partial. You will also need to post on the forums as a group, and you will write the number of posts that you did on time and add the number for the total. That total will be divided by the total required posts which we will give you. You multiply it by 100 and again you place that percentage under partial. In order to get your group average, you will average your 3 group percentages. Add them and divide by 3. Transfer that score to the appropriate column of the rubric. That percentage that you found will determine the grade for your group work. Then, for example, if your average is 93, you would mark the column under 5, which says complied with more than 90% of the requirements for the group work, posts, feedback, and group assessment. That would complete the evaluation of your online participation, which is worth 40% of the grade. The other 40% would be graded by the action plan that you present at the end. And this action plan has a rubric that also appears under the Home tab and guidelines which appear there as well. You will have self-assessment, peer assessment, and teacher assessment. And the average of those grades will give you the grade for your action plan. If the average of those grades, for example, is 8.4, you would grade yourself under number 4 on the rubric because it says that the average of self, peer, and teacher assessment is between 7.5 and 8.9. And finally, you will be writing your teaching philosophy, which also has a rubric to assess it, and it's worth 20% of the final grade. The teaching philosophy will have self-assessment and teacher assessment with that rubric, and your grade will correspond to the average between your grade and the teacher assessment. So if you receive a 4.5 from the teacher and you grade yourself with a 4.7, your average would be 4.6. Then you would grade yourself with a 5 on the rubric. Once you have determined the values for all the aspects on the rubric, you can determine your final grade. What appears on the rubric is an example. So, if, for example, you were graded with your average grade for your action plan was 8.4, and you graded yourself with a 4 on the rubric, because that's what the corresponding descriptor says, then you will write a 4.0 in this first column. Because the action plan is worth 40%, that will give you a 1.6 as part of the first part of your grade. You will do the same thing for each one of the aspects: attendance, then attendance at your grade as a host, individual, and group work. You will bring the whole number of the column that you have marked above and place it here, and then multiply it by the percentage that it's worth. In case of attendance, 5%, the host 5%, individual work 15%, group work 15%. And finally, your average grade of your teaching philosophy will give you a grade on the rubric that you will transfer into this chart and again multiply it by the by the percentage, which is 20%. When you add the figures in the right-hand column, you will get your final grade. And that's how you will be doing your self-assessment. I hope that this explanation was clear and that the chart will help you to track your work so that you don't have to rush and be confused at the end of the course.